The first on the list of Tupac most hated artists is the notorious B.I.G. Tupac met Biggie when they were still on the same side of the culture. One was already a force, the other still finding his place. Their bond came quickly. Pac gave Biggie advice, opened doors, and even let him crash at his place. There was trust, admiration, and a shared hunger for greatness. At one point, Biggie even asked Pac to manage him. Pac said no, but kept mentoring him. Their early friendship had real warmth, and in a different world, it might have stayed that way. That world ended the night Tupac was shot at Quad Studios in Manhattan, November 1994. He arrived expecting a recording session tied to someone in the bad boy circle. Biggie and Puffy were upstairs. Pac was ambushed in the lobby, shot 5 times and robbed. The betrayal cut deep. He believed people close to him had known something and kept quiet. He later said, "If I know somebody and I get shot, and you're standing there and you don't help me, then you're part of it." The release of Biggie's "Who Shot Ya" added gasoline. The song had been recorded earlier, but its timing felt pointed. Pac took it as a jab, like someone dancing on a wound that hadn't healed. Whether Biggie meant it that way didn't matter. To Pac, it was confirmation that the loyalty he'd once offered was not mutual. From there, the relationship unraveled. On "Hit 'Em Up," Tupac delivered one of the most aggressive dices in rap history. He tore into Biggie's reputation, mocked his marriage, and challenged his entire persona. Pac went beyond battle rap. It was personal, raw, and fueled by pain. Biggie, for his part, never returned fire in the same way. He kept his responses vague, embedded in verses, and relied on interviews to cool the situation. Some said he wanted peace. Others believed he knew it was too volatile to fix. Behind the scenes, the tension kept growing. Friends had to choose sides. Media coverage amplified every small detail. Violence between affiliates broke out more frequently. By the time both men were gone, Pac in Las Vegas, Biggie in Los Angeles, hip-hop had been changed. What started as friendship became one of music's most tragic feuds. Are you wondering who the next artist is? Stay tuned. The second one is Puff Daddy. The fallout between Tupac and Puff Daddy began the night Pac was shot at Quad Studios in New York. That night in November 1994 changed more than his health. It changed how he saw the industry. He walked into the building expecting to record with someone connected to Bad Boy Records. Puffy and Biggie were upstairs. Pac was ambushed in the lobby, shot 5 times, robbed, and left asking himself who knew what. What stayed with him wasn't just the shooting, it was what happened after. The silence, the distance, the way people he once saw as allies had nothing to say. Pac had respected Puffy's rise. He saw him as a driven executive building something powerful. But after the shooting, the call stopped. No outreach came from Bad Boy, no support, just space. To Pac, that space meant guilt. Then came "Who Shot Ya?" Biggie had recorded the track before the incident, but it dropped soon after. Pac didn't believe in coincidence. He saw it as a taunt, a way to laugh at his pain while pretending it wasn't aimed at him. Puffy's handprint was all over the song's release. As the head of the label, his decisions shaped the moment, and Pac took that personally. In an interview later, Pac was asked directly if he believed Puffy was involved in the setup. His reply was calm, "I believe so. I do believe so." It wasn't a rant, it was quiet, serious, and it stuck with fans and critics alike. From that point, Pac began including Puffy in his disses, not always by name, but always by implication. Bad Boy became a symbol of betrayal. Puffy became the image Pac associated with the fall of loyalty. Puffy, for his part, never responded directly. When asked years later, he said simply, "We don't even entertain nonsense." His refusal to engage became a statement in itself. He didn't argue or explain. He moved on, focusing on business and expansion, while the feud lived on in fan conversations and industry whispers. Unlike other beefs, Pac and Puffy's rift never played out in songs. There were no direct verses, just cold space. They never spoke again. No apology, no closure. Pac died believing he'd been set up. Puffy kept climbing the industry ladder, but the tension between them never faded. It stayed in the background, shaping everything around it. The third artist he couldn't stand was Mobb Deep. The tension between Tupac and Mobb Deep began while Tupac was incarcerated in 1995. During that time, he heard about a lyric in Mobb Deep's Survival of the Fittest that included the phrase, "Thug life, we still living it." For most artists, that would have passed without notice. But for Tupac, thug life was more than a catchphrase. It was a deeply personal code he had developed, even tattooed across his stomach. Members of the Outlaws later said that Pac felt the phrase had been borrowed without respect. He saw it as a challenge rather than a tribute. By the time Pac joined Death Row and reignited his career, that frustration had turned into open hostility. On his now infamous track, Hit 'Em Up, he didn't hold back. Right at the start of the song, he named Mobb Deep directly and mocked Prodigy's sickle cell anemia. The line struck hard because it crossed a line between competition and cruelty. Pac weaponized a real medical condition, aiming to diminish not just Prodigy's strength, but his humanity. It was personal for Tupac. Mobb Deep didn't ignore it. They recorded Drop a Gem on Him, one of the sharpest responses to any Tupac diss. The track was featured on their 1996 album Hell on Earth and included lines that questioned Tupac's street credibility and referenced rumors surrounding his time at Rikers Island. Prodigy explained later that the song had been intended as a direct response to Tupac's attacks. It was released as a single and began getting airplay across East Coast stations. But when Tupac was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996, Mobb Deep asked radio DJs to stop playing the track out of respect. Prodigy said in a later annotation that, although the song was pulled from the radio, it remained on the album without edits. The two sides never met in person. Prodigy and Havoc maintained that they were never sure why Tupac had targeted them. Prodigy once admitted he was confused by the entire situation. Havoc later reflected that, although the diss was aggressive, it brought attention to their name. "We about to sell some records," he recalled thinking. Prodigy died in Las Vegas in 2017, the same city where Tupac had been shot 21 years earlier. Their paths never crossed in life, but their names remained connected through one of the most pointed lyrical conflicts of the East Coast-West Coast divide. Coming in fourth is Nas. In 1996, Tupac took notice of Nas's line in It Was Written, "Fake thug, no love, you get the slug." He believed it undermined his street credibility. By then, Pac had survived the Quad Studio shooting, had Thug Life tattooed across his body, and considered himself the personification of that phrase. Nas's lyrics struck him as indirect but pointed. Pac recorded Against All Odds on the Don Illuminati, the 7-day theory beginning with, "This little man named Nas thinks he lives like me. Talking about you left the hospital, took 5 like me." A direct call out to Nas's authenticity and experience. 3 days before Tupac's own death, the two artists cross paths in New York's Central Park during the MTV Video Music Awards. According to Nas, Tupac approached him and said something along the lines of, "Me and you are not supposed to go at it. I heard you were joking about me." They spoke briefly and appeared to clear the air. Nas mentioned they had planned to meet again in Las Vegas to discuss music or reconciliation. But time ran out. Years later, an unreleased Nas track surfaced, a freestyle titled Real and As, recorded during his It Was Written era, soared online in 2021. Though unofficial, it included lyrics perceived as a subtle jab at Tupac, describing someone who imitates the life Pac lived. References to wealth, swagger, and threats that allude to A44 revolver appeared in the verse, but nothing named Pac directly. After Tupac's death on September 13, 1996, Nas paused a concert mid-performance to honor him with a moment of silence. He reflected on their Central Park moment, confirming Tupac had expressed regret and intended to remove any Nas references from his future releases. Unfortunately, Pac passed away before doing so. Nas later clarified that the original lyric in question was aimed at the notorious B.I.G., not Tupac. Misunderstandings and secondhand reports created friction where none was initially intended. Nas never officially released that freestyle or recorded any follow-up diss track. The tension faded quietly, and Nas instead focused on his artistry. Posthumously, songs like Thug's Mansion served as homage to Pac's life and impact. No confrontational tracks or physical standoffs followed. The single diss from Tupac remained. Nas opted not to escalate the conflict. Their brief face-to-face meeting, mutual respect for the art, and shared respect for Pac's legacy left the story open-ended rather than explosive. At number 5 on this list, we have Jay-Z. Tupac's issue with Jay-Z didn't come from personal betrayal or long history. It stemmed from affiliation. In 1996, Jay collaborated with Biggie on Brooklyn's Finest, a track that instantly caught Pac's attention. At the time, Biggie was already deep in a public feud with Pac, and anyone standing next to him became a target. Murder Inc. co-founder Irv Gotti would later explain, "That's why Pac started going at Jay. He's on a track with Big, so now he's fair game." Tupac responded fast and sharp. He name-dropped Jay-Z on stage and on record, once rapping, "I'm a bad boy killer, Jay-Z die too." That line wasn't abstract. It was a direct threat from an artist who treated loyalty like law. In Pac's mind, Biggie had turned on him. Now Jay was helping to elevate that voice, so there was no difference between them. Behind the scenes, Jay-Z was aware of the shots being fired. He was rising fast in New York, but knew that standing on Big's side of the line would bring consequences. DJ Clark Kent later revealed that Jay recorded a diss track aimed directly at Tupac. It was ready for release. But just before it could hit the streets, news broke that Tupac had been fatally shot in Las Vegas. Out of respect, Jay scrapped the song. He performed it once but never put it on wax. That moment exposed something rarely seen. Jay could spare if needed, but he understood when to walk away. The decision not to release the track was strategic, but it also showed restraint. The war Tupac had ignited was real, and Jay wasn't looking to keep the fire going after a funeral. What makes their tension so memorable is that it never had a resolution. Unlike Pac's situation with Nas, which saw signs of a truce, or Dre, which involved public fallout, his beef with Jay-Z existed in a tense space with no direct interaction. Jay stayed silent. Pac stayed offensive. That distance kept the tension alive. Years later, Jay would refer to Pac respectfully, but their paths never crossed in reconciliation. Tupac saw Jay-Z as another soldier in an opposing camp, someone who chose a side and had to live with what came next. There was no meeting, no closure, just a verse, a name, and a bulletproof silence. The sixth one is Chino XL. Chino XL, born Derek Keith Barbosa, entered Tupac's crosshairs in 1996 after releasing a line that infuriated Shakur. On his debut album, Here to Save You All, Chino dropped a lyric in the song, "Riot," that referenced Tupac's 1995 assault case and incarceration. The phrase was delivered as a punchline, but its subject matter triggered an immediate and hostile reaction from Tupac. Without hesitation, Shakur responded on "Hit Him Up," where he included Chino among those he had no intention of forgiving. That single lyric was enough to categorize Chino as an enemy in Tupac's eyes. Even though Chino had never met Tupac and had no personal interaction with him, the diss track made things crystal clear. Tupac grouped him with figures like Biggie, Mobb Deep, and others, marking Chino's name in a lineup associated with betrayal, disrespect, or rivalry. Chino had gained recognition for his intricate bars and intellectual metaphors. Raised in the Bronx and of Puerto Rican descent, he was signed by Rick Rubin's American Recordings at 16. His debut album demonstrated lyrical prowess and tackled a range of themes. But instead of the album's dense wordplay earning headlines, media attention zeroed in on the single line aimed at Tupac. The public didn't forget it. Tupac didn't either. After Hit 'Em Up dropped, Chino clarified in later years that his lyric had no malicious intent. He stated that he respected Tupac as an artist and wasn't trying to incite any real conflict. But there was no platform for apology. Shakur had already drawn the line. The feud never became a series of back-and-forth diss tracks, yet its tension lingered. Chino's name stayed tied to one of hip-hop's most aggressive battle records. Over time, Chino built a catalog beyond controversy. He released multiple albums, including I Told You So, Poison Pen, and Reconstruction, The Black Rosary. He explored deeper emotional ground, writing about personal loss and fatherhood. He also took roles in TV shows and films and worked with youth through educational programs focused on creativity and design. Even with that growth, the conflict with Tupac remains a defining moment in his career, not because of repeated shots or public insults, but because of how fast one lyric escalated into one of the most memorable call-outs of Tupac's final year. Finally, the seventh artist that Tupac hates is Dr. Director. Tupac's feud with Dr. Dre wasn't loud at first. It built in quiet, bitter moments. When Tupac joined Death Row Records after being bailed out of prison in 1995, he stepped into a label Dre had helped make legendary. But the partnership between two of the most influential figures in West Coast rap never took shape. Tupac expected Dre to be present, producing, guiding, and supporting. Instead, Dre was absent from sessions and distant from the label's growing conflicts. The rift widened after Snoop Dogg was charged with murder. During the trial, Suge Knight and Tupac stood firmly beside Snoop. Dre, however, stayed away from court appearances. Tupac took that personally. He valued loyalty and expected Dre to show up during one of Death Row's most public battles. That absence became a mark of Dre's priorities in Tupac's mind. Even musically, Tupac started to see Dre as unreliable. On the All Eyes on Me album, Dre's contribution was limited. While California Love became one of Tupac's biggest singles, most of the double album was crafted without Dre's involvement. Tupac began questioning Dre's work ethic and commitment to the team. Rumors within the label painted Dre as someone checking out, focused on business moves rather than Death Row's increasingly aggressive stance in the East Coast versus West Coast war. Tupac didn't stay silent. On Toss It Up, he mocked Dre by name. No longer Dre Day, arrivederci. He accused him of stepping away when the fight got tough and implied Dre lacked the fire needed to stand firm. He also alluded to Dre's alleged disinterest in the struggles of the street, contrasting that with his own activism and fearlessness. On Against All Odds, Tupac was more direct. Dr. Dre, punked out, now he's a quitter. The line was short but cutting. He saw Dre's exit from death row as cowardice. Their issues also touched deeper values. Tupac didn't respect silence when the culture was under pressure. He believed Dre had a voice, a platform, and the respect of the industry, but he chose comfort. Tupac wanted his allies to stand tall with him. He didn't feel Dre earned that place. Dr. Dre never responded in music. No public counterattack, no reconciliation, and no direct statement. Just silence, distance, and a void where two giants could have created history together. Through all of it, Tupac never backed down. Not from the rumors, the disses, the silence, or the doubt. He stayed loud. He stayed real. He kept dropping verses that cut deep, turning pain into poetry and betrayal into bars. They tried to play him, but he made sure his truth couldn't be ignored. So now the mic's in your hands. Was Biggie the one that hurt him the most? Did Dre's silence cut deeper than words? Or was Chino's one line the spark that lit the fire? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like this video if Tupac's voice still hits different, and hit subscribe if you want more real stories about the legends and the battles that made them.